Okay, we're going to talk about ellipses, and ellipses spelt with a couple of L's and a couple of S's as well. Singular would be ellipsis, so one ellipses. This refers to three dots that we use for a couple of purposes. And these dots are usually spaced, so put some spaces in between them to make them look a little bit more elegant. And you can see the first of these uses at the end of this passage. So what we've done here is we've added some dots to show that we're trailing off, and we can add some suspense or mystery or drama this way. So it says, sharks had started circling the island, ... Obviously a bit forced, but I think you can see the point of that in creative fiction. The other use of the ellipses, which is the one we're going to talk about in this video, has to do with skipping passages when you quote from a text. So let's say that we want to skip, or let's say that we want to quote something from this passage, and we'll start with "we were shipwrecked," and then we want to jump ahead to "I had brought my favorite book." So we want to quote those two pieces. Well, in the middle, so where we get to shipwrecked, and we'll focus just on the middle passage here, we're going to write shipwrecked ... and then we're going to add a connecting word, because often it doesn't quite make sense syntactically. So we're going to say shipwrecked, but I had brought my favorite book. And you can see there that we've nicely connected this, and the square brackets show that these words, the word but at least, is my word. It's not part of the original passage. Now, in the past, if you were to follow the MLA guidelines, for instance, they would suggest that, or they used to suggest that you actually put some square brackets around the ellipses as well, just to show that, you know, this is not in the original text, but you've added the ellipses. Nowadays, you can basically do without that. You don't have to add those square brackets. Next thing to notice is that sometimes you may want to jump from the end of a sentence or even from the middle of a sentence, but when your quotation keeps going, it's a new sentence syntactically. Well, in that case, you actually need 4 periods. So let's say that you write "we were shipwrecked," and you could even end it there if you wanted to, but let's say you go all the way to 1792, and then you keep going with "fortunately, I had brought my favorite book." So you would get to 1792, and the sentence clearly ends there, and then you'd add 3 more spaced periods, the ellipsis, and then you would keep going with "fortunately," and so on. So what you can see here is that we've actually ended up with 4 periods because one has to indicate where the end of the sentence is. And I think that's fairly natural. So if your sentence ends and you keep going further along the line, well, you're going to have 1 extra period. Another thing to notice is that if you were to quote this passage that ends with the ellipses here, actually let's just go to the other side here, you may want to indicate that the ellipses, or that ellipsis, is not your ellipsis, but was part of the original passage. So let's pretend that this is on page 7. Then what you can do in your citation is you add a semicolon, and then you might say something like ellipsis in the original, and the wording is somewhat up to you. And obviously it's hard to fit it all in one line here because we have to squeeze it into the screen, but you would make sure it's all on the same line. So that's pretty much it for using the ellipsis. I'm going to talk about one more thing, which is what you can do when you're quoting poetry. Okay, so let's say that you're quoting from the New Zealand anthem here, and you don't want to quote all of it. Well, often what you can do is you can just stick the ellipses in, as we've talked before, but sometimes if you have a block quotation and you're skipping multiple lines, then you can do something a little bit different. So let's say that you want to quote 3 lines here and the final line, but you don't need all the stuff in between. Well, you would start your quotation, so let's just pretend this is text, here's another line, 3rd line, and then what you're skipping is indicated by these dots that go across your screen. Instead of having just 3, you have multiple dots, and you keep on going, and often what people do is they don't go all the way to the end of the page, but you can just sort of line it up with the end of where your lines of verse end. And then the final line here is the one we add at the end, and then obviously a citation would follow afterwards. So in a block quotation, in other words, where the lines are underneath each other and you want to show that at least one line, one complete line has been left out, you can use these dots all the way across to show where that has happened. That's it for the ellipsis. I hope you found this useful, and I think you will, because when you're quoting, it just allows you to make your quotations more compact, to skip to exactly what you need, and I think your reader will appreciate that, not having to read through this really long quotation.